Doesn't sound like I'm, okay. Didn't think I'm here.
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 Here. Here.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We will open up the visitor section. I think we had one preset visitor, but I don't see her. So we'll just go to your cards.
I have Mr. Andrew McGowan
Okay.
to speak this evening, 1239 Torrey Drive.
It's a rare and lifetime first at anything, so appreciate the opportunity. Council members and mayor, I just wanted to come tonight and to express my opinion as a citizen of Nixa, that I'm in favor of passing changes to the town charter that would allow us to keep chickens in our yard.
So chickens is on the agenda, so we will, if you want to hold your comment until that point.
Okay, I can do that, so I'm not first.
You may still be, I don't know.
Mr. McGowan, if you'd like to return at the resolution section.
Yep.
Next up is Mr. Ron Sanders, 976 Glen Oak Drive.
I'll repeat that. My name's Ron Sanders. I'm at 976 Glen Oaks Drive, as you all know. I was missing last meeting, and I had some really good Alabama barbecue. Did you know that they soak their chicken in sweet tea?
Sounds good.
Something to think about. That's not what I come up here to talk about. Tonight, I would like to address y'all about the conduct of the city administrators and everybody that's involved in the running of our city, and to express the importance that the manner in which we conduct business is just as, if not more important, than the results of how we conduct business. There's a lot going on in the world right now. We have cities, last summer up in Springfield is one case, where people were allowed to run the streets, stop cars, bang on people's cars and mess up their personal property, while the police stood back and did nothing. The police were told by the city to stand back and do nothing. This is happening in other cities, and it's very serious. When we take away the autonomy of some citizens, okay, for the causes of others, we start to have a breakdown of that community. And a lot of times that comes from how we conduct business. There are hundreds of examples, and I could burn up my full 5 minutes just giving 10, but I think y'all understand what I'm talking about. The importance of how we conduct our business. And when you conduct your business, you are also telling those people and those organizations whether you are acceptable to the manner in which they will come and try to force or encourage change on your community. That weighs heavy on my heart because a lot of times that change is more of a capitulation than a free adoption of those changes. A lot of times it is a trampling on traditions and trampling on standards that people have, standards of how they want to live in the community and in the city. So as you go forward, I want y'all to consider that. Consider that how you conduct your business is sending out signals on whether our community is acceptable or is willing or is weak enough to allow people to come in and do things like spray stuff on our city hall and possibly have protests out in the street and destroy people's cars because they don't want to stop and listen or they don't want to be a part of it. And then at some point, y'all may be compelled to make that decision on whether to enforce the law or go with the status quo or go with what they want. It's going to be on you guys and everybody else in this room and everybody else that's connected to the municipality. And it's hard. Freedom is hard. Those decisions are hard. All of the considerations of one person's freedoms and one person's desires have to be balanced against everyone else's. And I just wanted to address y'all and let y'all know that there are many people here in the community that are watching this and that are very concerned about which direction our community will go when we are confronted with those challenges. And when we are confronted with those challenges, will you listen to the people in the community when they let you know that something is not desired or something is desired or action must be taken? It must be balanced. It must be balanced with the consideration of everybody's freedoms, everybody's liberties, and to make sure that one person's desires don't trample over another person's freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Anybody else? We will leave the visitor section open. If you'd like to speak on any item that's not on tonight's agenda, you can do so at this time. We'll look into the sweet tea chicken, maybe. I see if I can get a proclamation for that. Sweet tea chicken day or something. All right, we'll close the visitor section. We'll move on to our presentations. Site.
Good evening. So as I think almost all of you know, I'm clearly a working mama and also a small business owner, which is why my husband travels all week long. So my child has the unique opportunity to always see the inner workings of city council meetings and chamber events. But when he was 3 and we got him dressed up for Easter in his suit, he said, "Mommy, I look shark." And so ever since, it's been the same. So you all look very shark for your new photos this evening. But the April report, we decided to move to this first meeting in May. April was a very full agenda, and so we wanted to hold that and be mindful of your time. As always, I will just point out the activity that relates directly to your community, but of course, I'm always happy to answer anything for the reports that we do or from staff level. So under business development and attraction, Project Eli was a lead that Mr. Russell coordinated with us and also city staff, and we have been working alongside them to see if we can move this project forward, working on plans to assist with their business plan and projections. You'll see more about it in the next meeting, but today we actually had a great Zoom meeting connecting this client with the USDA and also a University of Missouri extension for some potential routes to move this forward. So that is progressing well. Project Horizon is a lead that we received and we've been cultivating for several years, actually. This is a regional company that's looking to move their headquarters to Christian County, and this is something, again, that we've been trying to cultivate for several years. We have some available inventory right now as far as existing buildings, and so we've been able to show that same building multiple times over the last month or so, 4 to 6 weeks. And this did result in a site visit for that location, as well as one in the eastern side of the county as well. Project Peak, a little bit further down, is a local pharmacy company that we were able to connect with Cox Health and their suppliers for potential services within their facilities. Cox, as you all know, does have pharmacy services, but they do work with outside suppliers. And so it's up to those two companies to see if they have worked together, but we're doing our part to see what we can do to help that local company expand. As they're looking at expansion, they might need additional business needs or building needs, and so we've also connected them with some existing partners to see if that would work well for them and are continuing in those discussions. In addition to the project lead, the Horizon that I mentioned we had a site visit with, we also received a lead from the Small Business Development Center, and we have a contracted partnership through them as a reminder, a memorandum of understanding as the first funnel and lead for services. We were also able to assist with a site visit for the facility here in Nixa as well, as they are continuing to expand. So that is a startup, but an expansion of the owners originally, and a lot of that has to be kept confidential under the Missouri Code of Ethics that we are bound by working with SBDC. We got a prospect lead, very initial and early phases, from a developer that we're working with in another part of the county for an IT company that he's working with in the region. This IT company is rapidly growing and interested in purchasing and building a location. We were able to suggest to him that Nixa would be the perfect location for that company, really based on the workforce that's here and their proximity. So we will continue to cultivate that and see if it can turn from a prospect to an actual lead. They currently have 120 jobs, and they're looking to grow to 200 in the next 2 years. There were just a few leads that we received through SREP. As a reminder, these are leads that we receive from the state level, oftentimes through the Missouri Partnership, that go down to the region. Rarely are we able to respond to those just simply because of the land or building inventory that we have based on the needs that are received. But when you see that, that's why, just to kind of give you a point of reference there. For business retention and expansion, you all saw the headliner coverage, and that Project Empire was, of course, New York Air Brake, and it was great to work alongside the city staff as we're continuing to move that forward. I'll expand on the BRE report at the end of this for the companies in Nixa that we have been able to call on from a staff perspective, and move down to workforce development and attraction. Mr. Russell was able to bring in the regional PenMAC manager to the every 2-week economic development update that we do with city staff. And that manager shared really interesting and dire information on the direct workforce here in Christian County and what he's seeing as it relates to temp workers and the wages that are available. We learned and garnered some great information from him, and the fact that their entire office was established in Nixa to actually support diversified plastics. And so through the information that we gained there, we just reached out to Senator Blunt's office and just wanted to magnify that voice. They're hearing from every corner of the state how employers are really suffering from employees not wanting to go back to work because of the federal aid. So there was a letter of impact that we wrote at the beginning of COVID, really speaking to the ripple effect that just diversified has, not only here in Missouri, but on the auto manufacturers and several industries throughout. We submitted that letter of impact to their office again in speaking to this issue from a workforce perspective, really trying to push from the legislative angle that these benefits do indeed expire in September as they are currently set to do. So unless you have any additional questions on that staff report, I'd like to switch gears and just highlight the BRE report, which I believe is at the end of this here. From interviews that were completed at the time of the April update, again, and we'll update you on the May activity at the next meeting. The Prudential meeting was scheduled in Nixa, and then I know that Insight Design has been conducted from the BRE perspective. As a reminder, we do these meetings from a set realm of questions with 2 counselors present, staff from Show Me Christian County, and then one of our volunteer coordinators to get that information, and then we will be working on pulling that in aggregate form the more of that information that we have to get to you. Ms. Evans, from the BRE perspective, was able to already complete the Certified Business Resiliency Manager training, and she passed the exam and was established as that. As such, because she passed, she was also awarded a student ID for FEMA. So this allows continued resiliency training, and she is actively putting together the Fortify Christian County program, utilizing the training through FEMA, through the CBRM training, and then also the Small Business Development Center and the International Economic Development Council. And lastly, specifically for this community, Ms. Evans in her presentation was able to be a keynote speaker for Nixa Rotary, specifically about the business retention and expansion efforts and how we hope to magnify that voice here in Nixa specifically as we work across Christian County. So that was April. I'll bring you May at the next meeting, but unless you have any additional questions, it's always a pleasure to be here and to give you the updates.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
All right, my pleasure.
We'll move on to our proclamation section since we're on the subject of economic development. We will do a proclamation. Whereas the International Economic Development Council is the largest professional economic development organization dedicated to serving economic developers. There's a lot of developers in there. Whereas the International Economic Development Council provides leadership and excellence in economic development for communities, members, and partners through conferences, training courses, advisory services and research, in-depth publications, public policy advocacy, and initiatives such as the Accredited Economic Development Organization Program and the Certified Economic Developer designation. And whereas economic developers promote economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating, retaining, and expanding jobs that facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base. And whereas economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurism in order to help establish the next generation of new businesses, which is the hallmark of the American economy. And whereas economic developers are engaged in a wide variety of settings, including rural and urban, local, state, provincial, and federal governments, public-private partnerships, chambers of commerce, universities, and a variety of other institutions. And whereas economic developers attract and retain high-quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions. And whereas economic developers work in the city of Nixa within the state of Missouri, and therefore I, Brian Steele, Mayor for the city of Nixa, do hereby proclaim the week of May 9th through May 15th, 2021 as National Economic Development Week. I'll present this banner. All right, we'll move on to our resolution section.
Resolution number 2021-51, a resolution of the Council of the City of Nixa establishing a special committee of the council, setting forth the membership of said committee, and referring Council Bill number 2021-044 to said committee.
Mr. Woodman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. Tonight, I am presenting Resolution 2021-051. This resolution is a result of council direction provided at the April 26, 2021 City Council meeting. It was during that meeting that council considered Council Bill 2021-044, which modifies the Nixa City Code to allow for the keeping of chickens within residential areas of the city. During that discussion, it was the consensus of council that this bill be referred to a committee for further study and discussion. The resolution for council's consideration this evening would establish a special committee to accomplish this direction from council. The committee membership will consist of Councilmember Graham as chair of the committee, with Mayor Pro Tem Giddens and Councilmember Lucas as regular members. The resolution also refers Council Bill 2021-044 to the committee for its consideration. This means if the resolution is approved tonight, Council Bill 2021-044 will be removed from the agenda. Finally, the committee established by this resolution is set to terminate on October 31, 2021. Should the committee need additional time to consider the issues referred to them, the council could grant further extensions by resolution. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So the concept here is that there were several issues that were brought up at the last meeting about the wording of the ordinance on the urban chickens, mainly related to, it seemed to require them to have to stay in the coop, and they couldn't free range in the yard, which is something I know that several people had commented on previously, that was something, a benefit of the chickens to get insects and things like that. And so we had a few other questions, and so we couldn't really have a good back and forth within kind of the order of business of a council meeting. And we've had success with this idea of having a special committee that can then meet and discuss, also meet with members of the public and do the same thing. So that's why we had made that move last week. And so we will, looks like any discussion or?
We haven't really met I did spend time emailing both of the other members of the committee. And the only two things that we really seem to be looking at possibly is making sure that it's put in that the wings need to be clipped and that there's a fenced yard. There may be more, but if we need to do this, can we add members of the people in here in the committee as well?
Yeah, I think
to address this?
the way the committees worked the last time was that you had a meeting and the public was invited and could speak, and it was more interactive instead of just the hearing and then having to do something.
So I don't see this one taking as long. I actually don't think it'll take long at all, but it was very helpful on the last time we did this to sit in a more informal setting and get to kind of have open conversations with members of the community on what they think. And Mr. Sanders was there, and I mean, I felt it was a lot better situation. And kind of how we discussed, there are some things that are left out of this or that are in there that we probably should remove. And if we're going to present something, I would rather it be something that everyone can agree on than just kind of doing it real quick and moving on fast. And then we realize later down the road that it wasn't the right solution.
Take a couple more weeks and get it right instead of having something that doesn't quite work, right?
Yeah.
Any other comments?
So how do we go about putting people on this committee then? Because I've not chaired a committee like this before, so.
It's just us
So it's
three.
just you, and then you have a open public meeting, and
Okay.
anyone can come that
Okay.
wants to comment on it at that point.
We'll
So if you
post it
want-
online and then y'all show
If you want
up.
to set a time, the three of you could set a time now, that would be useful, then the people here tonight would know when to come. So while they're doing that, we'll open up public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this, you can at this time. Or you can wait until we schedule the other meeting and come and speak then. Go ahead.
Hello. I was the original one to have brought it up to you guys. I just wanted to apologize for not being at the other meetings. I have never done this before and didn't really know what I was doing, and I had a couple people messaging me on should we show up or not, and I was like, oh, well, they're online now, we can all watch it, and so it didn't look like we have very much support. But still, as of now, the petition is at 629 signatures, so I thought that was pretty significant for just posting on the Nixa Neighbors groups. I know that there was somebody that had spoke last time about some of the problems with having the chickens. One of the things that she had mentioned was as a predator problem, but in your ordinances, you guys are kind of eliminating that problem by making sure that they're going to be contained in some kind of enclosure or their wings clipped or something like that. Somebody's dog shouldn't be allowed to get into your fence anyways. So that was one of the concerns that I wanted to kind of say, that there is a resolution to that. She had mentioned something about the chickens are going to tear up your mulch and your grass and stuff like that. Well, if you chose to have chickens, you're not going to have your pretty flowers where your chickens are. Because if you're a responsible pet owner, you have done the research to say, oh yeah, I want a chicken, and these are the things chickens do, and I'm not going to put my pretty flowers there. One of the other things, really just the same thing I was saying, is just like if somebody's going to get a new dog or a new cat, they're going to do research on what that dog or cat needs, just like they're going to do research on chickens, on what the chicken's going to need. So to say nobody can have chickens because they're not going to clip the wings properly, or they're going to destroy this, or they're going to get out of their coop, that's the same thing as, I mean, may as well say nobody can have a dog because maybe their dog's going to get out of the fence. So really, in my mind, same concept applies. I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the benefits. There's the egg production, there's the educational purposes. I'm a regular mom. I have 3 little girls, and I live in Nixa, and I'm going to raise my little girls in Nixa, and I would love for this to be a part of their childhood. That's in your hands now, on if that gets to be a part of their childhood. And I somehow became the chicken lady of Nixa, and I don't even know how that happened. But really, that's why I'm doing it. I want my kids to be able to experience that and have that of their lifestyle. I bribed them with coloring books. Also, the chicken droppings, they're good for fertilization. That was another thing that was mentioned, that they have a whole bunch of chicken droppings. Yes, they do, but you can also use them. It's not something that you just have to figure out where to put it. You can use it for your gardens. And they're fun. Chickens are fun. They have a good personality, just like a dog. You name them and you create relationships with them, and it can be fun for the whole family. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yes, state your name and address.
Name is Kylie Griffith, and address is 203 Pine Hill Court. Kylie? It's Kylleigh. It's funny. Weird name.
Probably need to put our notepad back out there again. Probably need to put our pad out there again. We used to have a pad that you could write your name down, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Adams, 589 South Carriage Crossing, Nixa. I just want to speak in support of the chicken ordinance in case I'm not able to make any of the meetings that you guys have. Under the current proposal of a cap on number of birds and no roosters and enclosure, I agree with everything Kylie said, and just want to offer my support for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if anyone else would like to speak? Nope.
Well, hello again, Andrew McGowan, 1239 Torrey. So I want to speak in favor of the chickens, but I guess I have a question too. In our original wording of the proposal, how was that wording determined? Did we copy that from a different town, or how did we determine those first things that now we're saying, you know, some might not be so good or not clear enough? I just was wondering how we originated that wording.
Mr. Tyson?
It's a combination. We took some language from a model ordinance that the state has provided for communities who want to adopt what they refer to as urban chickens. Some of the language we crafted ourselves through a process where kind of staff members come up with the general policy ideas, and then that's basically edited by the city attorney to make sense and work for an ordinance. And so it's kind of, this particular bill is kind of a combination of both of those things.
Thank you. I was wondering if any of you have looked at other charters for other cities on their on their keeping of chickens. Pardon me. I know I've looked. You know, going through a city's charter is not like, you know, the best use of your afternoon probably, but I was curious, you know, in part inspired by a friend of mine whose name is Mike. He was in the armed service all of his life, and in retirement, he wanted to have chickens, and so he wanted to move to Nixa. He couldn't have them, so he's in South Springfield now, and it's one of the things that he will go out and he sits and he watches his chickens and thinks about, you know, his life and the meaning of everything and all of these things, but it provides some manner of peace. And he talks about a lot about how he loves his chickens, just to watch his chickens. And even yesterday at church, I was talking to a lady, and she said that they want to move out of Springfield. And so they're looking everywhere but Nixa because they want to keep chickens with their kids. And so I looked through as many towns as I could think of that in the area: Springfield, Rogersville, Billings, Clever, the ones north of Springfield I don't ever really think about. I mean, all over, as many as I could think of, and they all have an ordinance allowing chickens. And even the one as proposed that we have now is not that different than any of the others, outside of perhaps Billings, which requires that they be like 300 feet from a structure or a neighboring property line. So it's basically a de facto ban for anyone in town. Nobody has that much room in their city lot. But there are others that they have fees or whatever. But I thought that our particular ordinance that we had proposed originally seemed fair compared to those others. And many towns do charge a fee, just like we do for registering your dog, just that you register that way. I'm in favor of it for a lot of reasons. I have my own kids. I like, farm fresh eggs. I think it's good for the economy. In the original boost of however many families, maybe 100 families that decide that they want to have chickens in Nixa, then, they have to have a coop, they have to have an enclosure. And we have multiple stores that can provide those things and keep that tax revenue here. They don't have to go anywhere else. There's the Tractor Supply or Nixa Hardware, or build it yourself at Meeks or whatever. And then I believe that it's good for us as a city, not just from that initial boost. We're not talking tens of thousands of dollars or anything, but I'd rather have 1,000 dimes than $2. The little bit over time that as those same people buy feed, they buy, egg cartons or oyster shell or whatever they're doing to keep their chickens healthy, then again, they're going to go where it's convenient, and that's the local businesses, and that will provide just a little bit of income in a long-term way as well. So those are just some additional reasons that I wanted to throw out there, and just to have us consider too, that maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's worked out in all of these other municipalities. We don't see the news doing reports on attacked chickens or anybody being mauled by a chicken. I've kept chickens multiple times in my life, and you can train them to come at a whistle. I had one really sweet chicken that would sit on my shoulder, and I pretended I was a pirate while I was doing my farm work. What are you going to do? But that chicken would just hang out, and it was my best friend. So it's just like having pets. They're not just free range. We understand we're in a city. My dog, it stays outside. I'm with it. We pick up the drop in. We follow the rules. So I think that most people understand that as well. So I'd like to thank the Academy and everybody else. My time is finished.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was good.
Oh, that was fun.
She's here. So, I am Clint Griffith. I don't want to brag, but I am the husband of the chicken lady. So, and this is Rayleigh, who is one of her daughters. And she has something she would like to say to all y'all about the chickens. You ready? Can I bring this down?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rayleigh, and I think chickens are fun and a good responsibility. And we really want chickens in Nixa, but we can't have them. I wanted to know if we could have them in Nixa.
That was all from her. That wasn't scripted, I promise. Is that it? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, now we got it. Huh? Now we have to.
Hello, I'm Crystal Tippy at 772 South Hackberry Avenue. I also want to put out my support for the chickens, but I think that it is very important that those who have never had chickens before have the ability to educate themselves on how to actually take care of them. You're gonna have a lot of people who are gonna be like, oh yay, chickens. They're gonna want chickens in their yard. They're gonna want to have the pets. It's gonna be a dream factory, like a new puppy. But if we don't consider putting into place the education of actually caring for an animal that somebody has never cared for before, we're gonna run into problems. So that might be something to consider in the future, is some sort of education program, something that they have to do, visit with a vet, go through something to make sure that they actually are able to take care of these animals. I moved here from Colorado 3 years ago. I used to have chickens all the time. I loved them. They're absolutely great. There's a lot of great benefits to them, but if you don't take care of them, it's going to be a problem. So again, I support it, but the education has to be out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chicken husbandry courses, Matt?
It's possible.
You can figure it out.
Find the right people. Yeah.
Carson County.
My name's Leah Kimberly, 802 South Creekwood Court, here in Nixa. I'll make this short and sweet. I'm also a friend of Kylie's. I love chickens. I raised them growing up. We've always had farm animals. My kids are very sad. They've lived in Nixa their whole life, and they've begged me for years, like, Mom, can we please have chickens? And they've known me to bend the rules quite often, and I'm like, no, we can't. Chickens are loud. We'll get caught. And they're like, no, come on. We can hide a cow. We can hide a horse. We can hide chickens. Come on, please. And I've kept saying no and no. I've even asked the neighbors. I'm like, hey, what do you guys think? Can we hide chickens back here? They're like, no, don't do it. But when Kylie brought this to my attention, I was like, yes, let's beg, let's plead, let's do whatever we have to get this passed, because the kids are at JTSC and they see that the chickens are at school. They're like, why can't we have them at home? Like, I don't know, guys. Doesn't make any sense to me either. So we're here. We're begging and pleading. Please, we will abide by whatever rules we have to, but just, we got to make this happen. You saw that little girl. She needs her chickens. We need these chickens. But, and I agree, we need rules, but we don't have to pass a test to get a dog. So let's keep the rules within our boundaries. Be polite about it. But that's all I have. Just had to say it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it? No, one more. Corinne.
Corinne Harsky, 482 Tiffany Boulevard. I'm also in favor of chickens. I would like to say that also I've been doing some research, and there are plenty of breeds of chickens that are small and quiet and don't cause much nuisance. So I just think if people are doing their research, I think it should be their responsibility to do the research just like you would with any other pet. But I think it can be done even in small spaces, and I just want to show my support.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we'll have one more call for the public hearing. Oh, Mr. Sanders.
My name's Ron Sanders, 976 Glen Oaks Drive. And put on a different hat here. I'm an HOA president. I have to deal with a lot of things that go on in a housing area. And this is going to present a challenge. I also have some experience with chickens, but it's not the experience that a lot of people in here have experienced. As a truck driver, I got to go to a lot of chicken places. And if y'all knew where your chicken came from and what it smelled like and how it all happened, you might think twice about eating chicken once in a while. That being said, like several people have said, there are going to be challenges. The challenges of keeping things clean, the challenges of not annoying your neighbor. You might want to have a conversation before then. Disposing of the chicken crap and all of that kind of stuff. And what do you do with them? You know, you're going to probably have to get rid of them after a while, some way, whenever they no longer become productive. Or we're going to have to deal with the pet syndrome, where we get pets and then all of a sudden we're not interested in them anymore. So all of those things have to be considered. And not wanting to sound like the Meisterburger here with all the bad stuff, I am in favor of the chickens, but it has to be done right. And whenever people screw up their chickens, they're going to have to face, some kind of adjudication. And there has to be a process for that as well. I hope that we have, as big of a turnout for our chicken meetings whenever they finally go, so that we can hash all this stuff out. And I hope that everybody keeps it real and remembers that there's a lot of hard work with chickens, and a lot of big responsibilities, like the little girl said. Yes, it is going to take a lot. I am for them though, so I will be at those meetings if I'm allowed and if I have the time, and help everybody sort things out. And I'm going to have to deal with all the disappointment from all the HOA livers, that are not going to be allowed to have the chickens, like my wife. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Heath Emerson from Nixa, Missouri. Actually born and raised here. It's my wife's and I's anniversary tonight, so apologize for running late. We're for chickens, for sure. There's probably been a lot said that I did miss, and I will go back and watch. But, the manure, the poop, we're looking forward to it. We have a huge garden. We want to get our own compost, our own dirt. We don't want to spend, I don't know how much our dirt is worth. It's gold. As far as what to do with chickens when they get out, or how to handle them when they're gone, or if they become a problem, it's no different than dogs or the pigs or whatever we have here in Nixa allowed. It's, yes, you have to deal with it. I want chickens, but it's not something where I'm like, I have to have chickens. I know everything about chickens. That's why I want chickens. I want to learn about chickens. I want to teach my kid chickens. I want to have eggs, every day, fresh eggs. Wow, sorry, I got nervous. So, the eggs. Does anyone here like tomatoes? You guys grow tomatoes? Anyone? You ever seen blossom end rot? It's basically where all your tomato ends go bad and you don't have any tomatoes in your garden. Eggshells. If you got a neighbor that's got eggs, collect them. Great way for calcium in the soil. Lots of other plants can thrive on that too. It's also great for insect deterrent. It also, So I keep talking about the garden. So we've got the soil, which plants need. We've got eggshells, which is a nutrient they need. We've got eggshells that prevent aphids, that help prevent deterrent. There's all sorts of insects that they help with deter. Now, they actually eat insects too. So we have a mosquito truck that goes around. That's a whole other thing. We won't go there. But they actually eat mosquitoes and other pests that we don't want in our yards, and it's a natural way of doing that. What else? My son would, if he were here, he's 4 years old, going on 5. He wants chickens really bad, and he would appreciate your vote on that. So that's all I got, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
sir. Not a directly related subject, but I would like to see if we can look into having a composting as part of the recycling service. My daughter was in for the weekend. She brought that up, that they have that where she lives. And so if it's something that's possible, let's look into it. I like the idea.
That's a good idea.
And we will, sure.
Chickens are also great at processing waste, so it could also minimize waste. You could get together with your neighbors and be like, if you have any leftover, scraps from vegetables, fruit, whatever, meat, they can eat anything pretty much. So could also cut back on that, on waste for the neighborhoods. So just wanted to add that.
And we'll have one more call. Anybody else? All right, close the public hearing. You guys come up with a date?
Next Monday, 6 o'clock.
Next Monday? 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
Either one.
I'd like 6, because if 600 and something odd people show up to talk about it, I would much rather not go till midnight.
All right. We'll schedule a meeting here next Monday at 6 o'clock for the committee, once we pass it. Nick's going to yell at me because we haven't passed it.
Sorry, Nick.
So I close the public hearing. Motion to approve the resolution.
I make motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Move on to our first reading section, Council Bill 2021-051.
evening. Evan, you mind to pull up the map that goes with the memo? If you'll just scroll down, I think. City of Nixa owns and maintains a, sorry, it's with the memo. Owns and maintains a sanitary sewer main located east of Nixa High School in the vicinity of where the school district is planning to build their new Performing Arts Center. So this main is actually in the way of that construction, so there's a need to relocate the main in order to make way for the Performing Arts Center. Like all of our mains that are not located in right-of-way, this sanitary main is contained within an easement dedicated to the city to allow us access for maintenance of that asset. So what this bill will do is it will conditionally approve the vacation of the easement where the existing sanitary sewer main is now, and then conditionally accept a new easement where the sanitary sewer main will be relocated to on the Nixa High School property. The conditions being that once the construction is done, it's been inspected by Public Works, and then I certify that all of those things have happened. Once that certification is done, then everything will just automatically flow from there, both the vacation and the acceptance of the new easement simultaneously.
Any questions?
Is the time that it's taking to do all this delaying their construction?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Any discussion? All right, move on to the next one, Bill 2021-052. Oh, I have to do a public hearing. Myself off. I know there was no vote. But open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item, you can do so at this time. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Move on to the next one, 2021-052.
I will be recusing myself from this one due to conflict of interest.
First reading, Council Bill number 2021-052, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute an STP urban program agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission. And consultant services agreement with CJW Transportation Consultants LLC regarding proposed improvements to North Street.
Travis?
All righty. For introduction tonight is a bill that would authorize the execution of a contract for services with CJW to move forward with the design concept for North Street from Maplewood Drive to Cheyenne Road. This is also coupled with a program agreement with MoDOT, which serves as the mechanism necessary to funnel the money from our federal allotment of transportation funds. Identified in the 2021 City of Nixa CIP for $546,882, also provided in the Ozark Transportation Organization's Transportation Improvement Program for 2021, is the project to allow for the design of and engineering necessary for the North Street corridor, again, from Maplewood Drive to Cheyenne Road. Through the execution of the program agreement with MoDOT, this will provide for a reimbursement of a portion of the funds in an amount of $437,506 upon the completion of the design work. The project was identified in the TIP as well as the CIP for $546,882. Through the RFQ process and subsequent negotiations with CJW, the project is being funded in an amount of $537,942.48, which is well within the anticipated budget for the project. So with that, staff has recommended that we move forward with the execution of the contract and the program agreement with Missouri Department of Transportation.
Any questions?
This is not going to actually construct the road. This is just the design and engineering of the corridor. Once the design and engineering, it will also include a probable estimate of construction. At that point, staff will be able to start to identify funding necessary to actually construct the road. This portion is just the design of it. Great question.
Is the road construction also STP eligible based on this as well?
Yes,
Okay.
the road construction is STP eligible, which is why we're going through the STP process to do the design work, not only for the monetary value it provides, but also allow for us to move on to that next step whenever we are able to afford the construction.
Then we may actually be someday be able to afford it then.
So if
That's
I
the
understand
hope.
this correctly, our initial investment's $546,882, but we're going, if once it's complete, we're gonna get reimbursed the $437?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
through our
So-
ST, right,
So it's just gonna cost us around $110,000 out of our budget?
approximately, correct.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Travis. We will open up the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this item, you can do so at this time. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Questions? All right. Move on to the next one.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-053, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa amending Chapter 117, Article 7 of the Nixa City Code to modify the city's density and dimensional regulations.
Good evening. Do you mind to bring up those other visuals? Good evening. So, do you mind to scroll down? One more, keep going. Keep going. One, keep going, right there, thank you. So, since I've been here for about 8 months now, I've done a lot of review of the city's zoning regulations to familiarize myself, and along the way, I've taken a lot of notes about things that recommended changes that I would propose to the city. In my experience, having a well-crafted zoning regulation is absolutely vital to a community's economic development. Something I've noted in the more than 12 years I've been doing this is that a lot of times economic development prospects are snuffed out in their nascency by poorly drafted and crafted zoning regulations. And so I'm always sensitive to those things as I go through this. And in this case, what accelerated my concern and prompted me to go ahead and start working on this particular proposal was I was contacted by an engineering firm who was scoping a site here in Nixa for commercial retail development and was not able to make it work because of some setback requirements that they had read in our code. And so they brought this concern to my attention. They said, I've already informed my client this isn't going to work. I can't even fit what to them was a relatively normal sized building on a relatively normal sized lot. They said, how can this be? I said, well, let me take a look. And so as I looked through this particular article of our zoning regulations, I could empathize with their concern. And it did appear that these some of our setbacks were eating into some of our corner lots, commercial corner lots, and other commercial lots in the city, such that there wasn't much buildable area left. And so that prompted me to review the entire article a little bit more in depth. And what I found were multiple errors, some conflicting requirements, and as well as some omissions. So some of the tables that were in there omitted certain zoning districts completely. So I thought, well, this will be a good opportunity to clean all of this stuff up and propose a repeal and replace, which is what this bill ultimately does. So it would repeal our current dimensional standards and replace it with the bill that we've proposed. So just to cover some of the major substantive changes, a lot of the things that we've kind of restructured the whole thing, but a lot of the substance hasn't really changed, particularly for residential development. All of the substantive changes are really mostly focused on commercial yard areas. So when I say dimensional standards, what I'm talking about are those regulations in our zoning code that talk about the size of lots, the height of buildings, the size of buildings, how far the buildings must be set back from a road or from a property line, things of that nature. So what I've got here in this table is a summary of what in all of the city's commercial districts, what the current setback distance is. That's the measurement that is a building must be set back from the property line, and then what's being proposed by staff. And you'll see that some of the more remarkable changes are being recommended in the commercial industrial districts here. Probably the most severe being a reduction in the highway commercial district, that front yard setback of 60 feet being reduced down to 20. So in my review of these, what I'm always looking for is how much value is being added to the community by this regulation compared to the cost that it also imposes. And ideally, you're looking for value that matches that cost, or ideally value that exceeds those costs. And when I saw some of these setbacks being as large as they were, what it said to me was we may have some regulations here that are imposing costs that outweigh the value that the community is getting back in return. Now, perhaps in its when our zoning code was originally adopted decades and decades ago, these setbacks served a slightly different purpose. But in contemporary planning and zoning, we now have modern building and fire codes that will require separation distances from one building to another from a property line in order to ensure that everything is safe. And so when you have those modern building codes that are ensuring the safety, the building setbacks themselves don't necessarily serve that same purpose. And since your density is controlled by controlling lot sizes rather than building sizes or building setbacks, you got to really kind of question what kind of value are we adding by having some of these large setbacks, particularly when we know from experience that it's kind of squeezing builders and developers in on these lots, reducing the buildable area, and potentially causing those types of situations where a firm may be doing their own scoping, just reading through our zoning code online and making decisions with their clients to not come to Nixa without ever actually us having any contact with them, right? And I think that maybe happens more often than people like to think about, which is why I'm so such an advocate for making sure our zoning regulations are clean and clear and intelligible to a broad range of audiences. So this table compares the current to the proposed. I've also included a table in the memo that I drafted that compares a sample of these to a sample of other communities that are of comparable size, not only in the Springfield metro area, but in other metro areas around the state, to kind of give you a sense of how other communities handle this same issue. Not that we necessarily have to do what other communities do, I'm just trying to provide a point of reference. If you'll go to that next illustration, please. So another thing that is being proposed here is right now we limit the height of commercial and industrial buildings to 35 or 40 feet. That when I saw that, I thought, well, that's kind of restrictive. Oftentimes you'll need an industrial building to be relatively tall depending on what types of equipment you may need in there. And so by imposing that restriction, it may be, again, eliminating Nixa from consideration within the marketplace for some opportunities. And so what's being proposed instead is to not limit the maximum height on these buildings really at all by just some kind of set number of feet. What will happen is, again, our building and fire codes will restrict the height of buildings in order to make sure that they're safe, right? But beyond that, all that's being proposed from a zoning perspective is what is, I think, more commonly employed by communities, which is this 45-degree bulk plane requirement. So wherever an industrial or commercial building would be proposed to be constructed next to a residential zoning district, you would have, as this illustration depicts, a 45-degree bulk plane drawn from the property line where the commercial or the industrial property meets the residential property, and then that will dictate the maximum height of that building, thus forcing the taller commercial and industrial buildings further away, right? So you're accomplishing both height limitation and setback from the property line in one single regulation. If you go to the next illustration, please. And then this illustrates another change that I'm proposing. Right now we have, and this is what kind of created, I think, a lot of confusion. We've got a set of setbacks from the center line of a road and a set of setbacks in our current code from the property line. And then there's these later subsections that kind of try to walk you through how you decide which one to use. And that's what I think has created a lot of confusion in the conversations I've had with some of the engineering firms. So what we're proposing to do instead is to have a setback from the street center line that will ensure that we do not have buildings or structures in what the city will need as future street right-of-way for whatever class of roadway that may be, right? So if it's a primary arterial and we need 90 feet of right-of-way in the future and we don't have that yet, this will say, hey, you can't put your building within what will need to be the future right-of-way for that street, thus ensuring that we can fully develop our transportation corridors without having to buy buildings or pay to move buildings, et cetera. So that's the limitation of that setback. And then the only thing you have to worry about from there is just the setback from the property line. And we're not kind of confusing those two setbacks together in a single table like our previous code was. You'll know what you need to have for the right-of-way, and then from the property line, what you'll need to have for the building itself, again, with some of the recommended changes in those commercial and industrial districts. So, and then lastly, staff is, of course, recommending these changes. Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on this proposed bill last Monday and unanimously voted to recommend these changes. While I have your attention, I want to bring one other issue up. Throughout the course of preparing this ordinance, I discovered what is a lack of harmony between one aspect of these standards and an aspect of our International Residential Building Code. I didn't put that into this proposal at first because I caught it in the middle, and then I wanted to take time to make sure I had fully researched the issue. But I've concluded my research, and so I thought it might be worth, while we're in here doing this, if council desired, you could amend this and just fix this issue right now rather than waiting for staff to bring it back later. It's totally up to you. Staff's not recommending an amendment tonight. Just want to bring this to your attention, and we can potentially discuss a possible amendment at the next meeting. So if you'll go to the next illustration. What the city's current zoning code provides for in terms of residential interior side yard setbacks is that your building only must be set back 5 feet from the property line as measured to the foundation wall, right? So obviously, most houses are customarily built with projection from that wall in the form of an eave hanging off your roof like you see here. So in the case where you have a 5-foot distance from the property line to the foundation wall, you're almost always also going to have an eave that projects within that 5 feet. The potential lack of, or the lack of harmony that I mentioned is that the International Residential Code that we've adopted says any projections that are closer to the property line than 5 feet must be fire rated in order to prevent the spread of fire, which is not, so we've not been implementing it that way, and so we need to now reconcile that. So I took some time to conduct some research to make sure that as a staff member I was comfortable with the rationale for those requirements, read through a lot of research provided by the National Fire Protection Association, some of the simulations they've done, because in all honesty, I can tell you that some of the things you find in building codes, they use a lot of numbers because they have to set certain limits on numbers of feet. Sometimes those are just picked arbitrarily. Somebody had to pick a number, so they picked 50. So I want to make sure that wasn't the case here, that it was just some arbitrarily chosen distance. I don't believe that's the case. I think there was a lot of research put into why the separation distance should be 5 feet. So something the council can consider, if you'll go to that next illustration. And again, this kind of illustrates the problem. Go one more. So something that staff would propose, I think really there's 3 options here. You can just leave it as it is, and staff can begin to enforce that requirement for the fire rating of the eave. Some of the concerns with doing that are there's kind of a domino effect, right? Once you seal up your eaves, you no longer have passive ventilation into your attic, so now you have to provide some kind of mechanical ventilation for your attic space, so there's other requirements. So eventually you reach a point where is this really worth doing? I think most builders might testify to you that it's not worth doing. Let's just set back the building a little bit further, which is what staff's recommending here, which is to make our setback 7 feet to the foundation wall. That way you don't have to worry about the projections getting closer than 5 feet. This is what is the case in all of the other communities that I reviewed in preparing for this. I've reviewed, I don't know, maybe a dozen other communities looking for maybe somebody else who had dealt with the same issue, but it seems as though everybody's requiring at least 5 feet of separation completely because of that IRC requirement. So we could do this 7 feet to the foundation wall, solve the issue that way. Of course, council also, as the legislative body, could amend the building code itself to remove that requirement for the fire separation distance, but staff does not recommend that. I spoke with a representative from the Nixa Fire Protection District. Of course, they also do not recommend that. They are comfortable with following the building code or providing for this 7-foot 7-foot setback. Spoke with representatives from the Home Builders Association of the Greater Springfield area itself. They're going to take a little bit of time to deliberate further, but their initial reaction was that they don't have any concerns with this. Again, this is totally normal everywhere else in the region. This is what the setback is. And so it's not as if this is somehow not customary in any way. It just hasn't been customary here in Nixa. So again, this is the staff recommendation. This is not a part of the bill that was presented to you this evening. So if we wanted to go ahead and fix this now rather than try to bring it back at some future meeting, it would take an amendment, and of course, the city attorney and I can help craft that amendment. But in my mind, it would be as simple as just changing one number, 5 to 7, and the issue is solved that way. So we can discuss this further, answer questions. I just wanted to bring that to your attention while we're in this particular code section and have the opportunity to address it.
Questions?
Yeah, if the setback to the foundation is 7 feet, could there ever be an instance where there would be a projection that would project more than 2 feet out from the foundation?
It's possible, unlikely, but possible.
Okay, is there a reason that the setback is defined as being to the foundation and not to projections?
Yes, a good reason, actually. It's very inconvenient. I worked in a community where we measured to what we refer to as the drip edge, which is basically the edge of the eave rather than the foundation wall. That is very problematic because you do not, as the inspector going out in the field, once that foundation is set, it's not moving, right? And at that point in time, you don't know where the edge of the building is really going to be. You can only estimate, and then if you're off, you're in violation of the setbacks, and then people won't So it's very problematic to measure from anywhere other than the foundation wall for that practical reason.
That makes sense. But you feel that 7 feet is enough to almost eliminate the possibility of a projection coming out too far?
Yes, I think I'm trying to think of any instance that I've seen in where that wouldn't accomplish it. But again, it's like I said, it's possible, but I think highly unlikely that you'd have more than 2 feet of a projection.
Okay.
We can certainly pursue try to get some testimony from some actual home builders, since that's not what I do. That may be a little bit more credible than my own testimony.
Okay.
How would this affect current developments? So if someone's building 200 houses and they have 100 of them done, and all of them, the setback's 5 feet, and we change this, the next 100, does it have to be 7?
You would, of course, you're losing 4 feet, right? If your intent, so that's assuming your intent was to actually build all the way up to 5 feet. That's actually not what's happening. We don't have where every building is built this close, right? This is like the minimum. Most houses, I would venture to say, the majority of the homes that are being built are not this close, right? So you're already dealing with what I think are a minority of the cases. But in those cases, I suppose the question would be, are they all the way up to 5 feet on both sides? And if so, the impact is going to be to have to shrink the floor plan, which, again, is that problematic? I think depends on several factors. We've discussed some of these scenarios as staff. I suppose there would be some buildings planned for certain lots where the lot was so narrow and you had completely maximized it, thinking, well, I'm in Nixa, so I can go all the way to 5 feet, and if I lose those 4 feet, I got to go from a 3-car garage to a 2-car garage, and now I've lost some value in this potential home that I wanted to build. That, to me, is the one instance where I see it could have a significant impact. Now, whether that actually occurs is difficult to say, because, like I said, not every builder approaches this with the intent to go to 5 feet on both sides. And like I said, that's the minority of cases, though it's certainly possible. And in those cases, you would have some impact, a loss of 4 feet.
Okay.
Could we add something where you would have the ability to appeal that if on a currently plotted lot, on a lot where it had already been plotted into a subdivision?
Yeah, what I would suggest, and I thought through this before, the logistics of it might become complicated, but the outcomes, I think, would still be good. Of course, the principal outcome we're looking for is to get at least 10 feet of separation between the points of the building. So I suppose you could say, hey, on this particular lot, since it's already platted and it's within a certain number of months from the adoption of this, I know for a fact that the house next to me, I'll still be more than 10 feet from them, even if I'm at the 5 feet. So we're still accomplishing the goal, even if not because the building code is written saying, well, we don't know how close your neighbor's house is going to be, so you just got to be 5 feet from your property line. But say your neighbor's house is 10 feet away, you can accomplish the same goal in that case, and I suppose we could set up some kind of review that staff could go to. If you know the location of the neighboring house and it's not going to create this conflict of the fire separation, that we could provide for that. That would be a more complicated amendment that I suggest we might want to bring back later, since that will add to some of the drafting, but I do think that's possible and reasonable.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up public hearing, so you're
Oh, sorry.
open up public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item, you can at this time. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Do we want them to bring back an amendment that includes what we discussed? The 7 foot and then some sort of language that from X time of adoption, that you would have the ability to appeal that
That'd be good, yeah.
based on platted lots? Okay, yeah, let's do that then. All right, we'll move on to the next one.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-054, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa rezoning 18 acres of property generally located at the southeast corner of the Main Street and Tracker Road intersection from R1 and GC zoning districts to R1 and R3 zoning districts.
So the next 3 bills are all related. These are all submitted by the same applicant and all kind of related as a single project, though there are 3 applications, so it's being presented to you as 3 separate bills. So I'll provide just one summary that covers it all and then be available for questions as we move through the 3 bills. Do you mind to bring up those additional illustrations? They were at the top of what you had previously shown. So these 2 maps illustrate what is existing at this particular intersection. It's the intersection of Main and Tracker Road. I'll try to do the turnaround. This is existing, and it illustrates, this is the only property that's currently in the city that's associated with these 3 applications. It's zoned primarily R1 single-family residential with just a little bit of general commercial here in the southeast corner of the property. What's being proposed is to annex 2 additional properties that are also owned by the same family into the city, annex them, and then zone them to a combination of R1 single-family and general commercial, as is shown here. So if you go to the next illustration. The 3 separate applications are kind of illustrated here to give you a reference. Each one of these associated with the separate bills 54, 55, and 56 this evening. Application number 1 being the rezoning of the tract that's already in the city at the southeast corner of Tracker and Main from what is now a combination of R1 single-family residential and general commercial to a combination of R3 multifamily residential and R1 single-family residential. The second bill will annex the 10 acres that's located just east of that tract, and then upon annexation, zone that tract to a combination of R1 single-family residential and general commercial. The third bill, Bill 2021-056, will annex the 28 acres located at the northeast corner and then zone that acreage to a combination of R1 single-family residential and general commercial as shown here in this illustration. One of the questions we're always concerned with on annexations and zonings are how well it conforms to the city's current future land use plan. In this case, the arrangement of land uses as they're shown here don't conform closely, although the proportions of land uses do. And the reason you don't see the arrangement, and you may just be asking yourself this anyways, is why is the general commercial located on the tracker frontage east of the intersection rather than on the intersection itself? I think this next illustration will help you to understand why. One of the major issues on all of these sites being the karst topography, the prevalence of sinkholes, that's causing some adjustments in the arrangements of land uses here. So all in all, staff's opinion is that this is conforming to the land use plan generally, even if we've had to kind of shift some things to fit around the sinkholes. The most impactful sinkhole perhaps being that one that is right there at the intersection on the southeast corner, where again, you might normally expect to see a commercial land use, but it's eaten up by sinkhole, thus prohibiting really any development. And so that kind of forced the general commercial land use further east, as was shown in that previous exhibit. So if you'll go to the next illustration, all of these sites do have availability of municipal utilities. You see the water main there in red, sanitary sewer shown in a dark blue, and then electric facilities shown in purple. Again, available to the development and capable of supporting all of the land uses that would be permitted by this particular zoning arrangement. If you go to the next illustration, please. Here, this kind of illustrates what will be the traffic situation. So the city's current policy towards traffic improvements requires that anytime there is a new development is going to intersect a collector class thoroughfare or a higher class, so this is basically collector, secondary arterial, or primary arterial street, that a traffic study has to be done by an engineering firm capable of adequately providing for that study, and then that study will reveal what improvements are needed to those transportation facilities in order to support the impact that this development is going to have on those facilities. So unlike water and sanitary sewer, of course, streets are not kind of closed systems. Anybody can drive on them. So it's important that we do this in a way where the required improvements are relative or proportional to the impact that the development is going to have on those streets. And so that's what the traffic study does. So now this layout is not set in stone. This is just a layout that the developer provided as an illustration of what they might do. Of course, we're not improving that layout tonight, just the zoning. But they have proposed a total of 5 public street intersections on Main and Tracker, Main being a collector class thoroughfare, Tracker being a secondary arterial class thoroughfare. So they would perform a traffic study that would study the impact of this development at all of those locations. And then that engineer will make a determination as to how those streets need to be improved to support that impact. Likely you'll see the addition of turning lanes, potentially the improvement of sections of roadway in order to make sure that vehicles can enter and exit safely without creating any hazards or unnecessary congestion. Normally they would also study the intersection of Main and Tracker, but of course you're probably familiar that the city has already made some improvements there. And so no improvements are likely to be necessary now, given that those improvements were made prior. Do I have one more illustration? I don't think I do. I don't. So staff is recommending the approval of all 3 of these applications. The Planning and Zoning Commission held public hearings on all 3 of these applications last Monday evening and voted unanimously to recommend the approval of these developments as well.
Any questions? Can you get back to the pretty one? The one with all the sinkholes on it? Yeah, that one. That one, yeah.
The pretty one.
A lot of sinkholes. So all this property's already been annexed into the city limits?
No, just one of them is currently in, and then 2 are being proposed for annexation.
That's the one on the southeast corner?
The 10 acres, the one that's labeled as number 2 on the map there, that's annexation and zoning. And then number 3 on the northeast corner, that's annexation and zoning. The one that is indicated as number 1, that's already in the city.
Okay.
What about the property immediately to the east of number 2? Is that in the city limits as well?
It is not, no.
Okay, so that's...
To the east of both of these tracts, there is, it's presently unincorporated Christian County.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you.
I don't like that entrance on Main Street.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the sinkhole on the number 2 property just continues over into the unincorporated portion.
It does. I actually questioned that property 2 weeks ago, and there's sinkholes there.
So we'll open up public hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this item, you can do so at this time.
Mayor, council members, my name is Roger Ackley. I own the property east of number 2. back when, we've been there 20-some years, back when they did Copperleaf, the Dick Short developed that and wanted to fix Tracker Road. Well, we've got a major problem with Tracker Road, and I see that they've got a plan for that, a plan for it. But right now, because CC and Main Street out there is in the county, at any given day in the morning going to work, if I take a right out of my driveway, that means go east, I'll have a long line of cars behind me that are trying to race around to Newcastle and go out CC out that way, thinking it's faster when it's really not. So we've got a real traffic problem there with the hills. If anybody come there, just come out of my driveway, you've got to be fast getting out of my driveway. And right across the street from me is Woodview. They have the same issue. So that's, I hope, whatever you do there, you really take that in consideration because it's dangerous right now. Dangerous. All right, thank you. Oh, my address is 336 East Tracker Road. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will leave open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Garrett. I'm with Toth and Associates, civil engineer on this project. I'm here to represent the developer Morlock Builders and Associates, as well as the architecture firm Marshall Waters Woody. I don't have a whole lot to add other than at Toth we are very excited about this project. We put a lot of thought into it, and we think it would be a great addition to the city. So with that, I'll leave it up to you guys if you have any questions, civil engineering related.
Any questions? Mr. Engineer?
No.
Questions now? Okay. Oh,
Sorry. I am concerned about that entrance I'm seeing next to that big sinkhole on Main Street, because that's really close to a stoplight, and there's a little hill right at the top of that, and there's a lot of traffic that goes through there, and I can just see lots of problems with an entrance at that particular spot instead of off Tracker.
Yeah, appreciate that input, appreciate his input as well. We'll take that all into consideration if this goes to the traffic study phase.
It looks like that's about where the improvements ended, is
Yeah.
about where that road plugs
Yeah.
in, so hopefully we can get that, with the traffic study, we could extend the improvements a little bit farther.
And we managed to get the stoplight
encompass
put
that.
there because the people at Wicklow were so concerned about not being able to get across the road and get out on Main Street because of the traffic there. It's tremendously.
Yep.
Just a lot of people that go through there every single night and morning.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there's going to be a church on the other corner. Oh, that's
And we will leave open the public hearing. That gets done there. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or questions?
Nope.
All right. We'll move on to the first reading of the other one.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-055, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa annexing 10 acres of property generally located at the 100 block of East Tracker Road and zoning said property to R1 and GC zoning districts.
If I might, I just want to reiterate, because sometimes I was hesitant to include the maps with the actual layout, just because I know it creates that impression in everybody's mind that that's what it's going to be. But that's really just an illustration that the developer's engineer put together so that we could work through some questions in preparation, but they are not in any way committed to that particular layout or those entrance locations. So I just want for everybody to keep that in mind, so particularly somebody in the public walks away thinking that's what it's going to be, and then it's different later, thinking that we pulled a switcheroo or something. It could very easily be something different later.
Any questions on the second one? We'll open up public hearing on the second ordinance. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Move on to the third one.
First reading, Council Bill Number 2021-056, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa annexing 28 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of the Main Street and Tracker Road intersection and zoning said property to R1 and GC zoning districts.
Same thing, over again, that's fine. We'll open up the public hearing on the third ordinance related to this annexation. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion on the third ordinance? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the second reading section. Bill,
Second.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Second reading, Council Bill number 2021-043, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa repealing ordinance number 1388 for the purpose of opting into the sales tax holiday established by section 144.049 RSMO.
Good evening. This is the third meeting that we've talked about the sales tax holiday. Back to school, first weekend in August, the city would forego collecting sales tax on back-to-school supplies, clothing, and there's a whole list of things. But I think we've had a pretty robust discussion on it, so it's staff recommendation that we pass this ordinance so that we can align ourselves with action plan number 5 in our Nixa strategic plan.
Any questions? Thank you very much. We will open up public hearing. If you would like to speak to the back-to-school sales tax, you can do so at this time. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
So made.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas.
Yes.
And we will skip 2021-044 based on the prior resolution and move on to 2021-045.
Second reading, Council Bill number 2021-045, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with the Nixa Area Chamber of Commerce regarding a public art program utilizing city electric boxes and amending the 2021 annual budget to fund said program.
Mayor, Council, as mentioned, this is the second reading for 21-045, which would authorize me to enter into an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce that would allow the Nixa Arts Council to be able to provide art to the city that would then be placed on some of the city-owned electrical boxes. This program would start on North Main Street, where we've identified 5 boxes that we could start with this program with a preliminary cost estimate of about $3,500. Along with this ordinance is also a budget amendment in the amount of $6,000 that would provide the initial cost for setup, but also provide some additional funds if some of that art wants to be changed out at some point this year, or in the case of vandalism or something like that, we could have some additional funds to take care of that. And then I'll just also mention that this program fits into the city's strategic plan under Fun and Unique Places and helps accomplish action plan number 4, which is to implement a process for members of the public to beautify public spaces.
Any questions? All right, thank you, Jimmy. And we'll open up the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this item, you can do so at this time. And we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
So made.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff.
Yes.
And 2021-46.
Second reading, Council Bill number 2021-046, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to execute on behalf of the city a memorandum of understanding with Nixa Public Schools regarding the shared use of certain baseball fields.
Good evening. As discussed in the April meeting, this memorandum of understanding with the school system would just go to document and strengthen the alignment of use of the baseball fields that the city does have on school property that we built to use for our baseball program.
As mentioned, this would move us from the Century Field that we built to the Summit Field, and then also keep us on the High Point Field in which we built. And so it's just kind of a movement for us, which hasn't been a big deal so far in the start of our baseball season. But this just kind of gets into more of a documented memorandum with the school district as that understanding. And then we would review this annually to make sure it's still working with both entities.
Any questions? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And we'll open a public hearing if you'd like to speak to this item. Matt has to clean up for himself.
Right.
And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve.
So made.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Me.
I'm sorry.
Darlene. Thank you. Closer. Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens.
Yes.
And one more, 2021-045.
Second reading, Council Bill Number 2021-047, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Nixa authorizing the city administrator to apply for and accept a 2021 Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant in the amount of $9,065, which includes a matching requirement.
Mayor, Council, on an annual basis, we have an opportunity to apply for a grant, actually a federal grant, through the Bureau of Justice Assistance for reimbursement up to 50% of the cost of a bulletproof vest. For fiscal year 2021, we are looking to request $9,065, and we anticipate a reimbursement amount of $4,532.50. Those vests that we buy would outfit our new officers and also replace expiring vests on our current officers.
Any questions? Thank you, Chief. And we'll open up a public hearing if you would like to speak to this item. And we will close the public hearing. Any further discussion? Motion to approve?
So made.
Second?
Roll call, please. You know, Darlene does the police ones.
Darlene Graham,
Yes.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson.
Yes.
All right. Move on to our discussion items. The only discussion item we have tonight is for the council liaison assignments. So hopefully you thought about that, and so it's a schoolyard pick'em. Mr. Peterson gets the first pick.
I would like to have the planning and development department.
Or you can trade it for a number 1 and number 2 round draft pick next year.
For next year.
And who's next?
Justin.
Justin.
I think administration got cut short due to COVID, so I'd like to stay with administration.
There you go. And Ms. Graham.
I'd like to stay with the police department.
Mr. Giddens.
I will take Public Works. Sorry, Doug.
And Ms. Hookstrat.
I'll take Parks.
And Mr. Lucas. Who does that leave you?
Looks like I've got finance.
Ah, yes, that is the best one. All right. I think that's all we have on the agenda for tonight. Anything else from staff? Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd like to jump in and get some additional clarification on with the direction from council on the appeals process related to the dimensional regulations. Just so the council's making an informed decision, I think we already have an appeal process in the code. It would be the Board of Adjustment if they ever need to grant a variance for some kind of issue related to the building setback. I think that would fall within their jurisdiction. And as it relates to subdivisions that are currently being developed, there's this concept known as vested rights, where if you have taken advantage of a current code and then it's amended, as long as your investment within it is substantial enough you acquire a vested right in that. So assuming that someone's poured a foundation wall at this point and made that kind of an investment, they probably have a vested right in the current code prior to the 7-foot setback. So I wanted to make sure council was aware of that
I think we wanted to extend it to platted lots so that they didn't have to come back and replat the lots if they had platted them with the idea that they would have a 5-foot setback.
So currently existing platted lots. Okay,
Current existing platted lots. Right.
that's workable. I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that, so I knew what kind of language we were looking for.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Go ahead,
Council, I'll just mention a couple of things. One, the workshop dates, as a reminder, June 24th and 25th. And then the second thing is Sucker Days is coming up. So don't forget that, the weekend of the 22nd. So, and I think Drew's got something to add to that.
Yeah, the city will have a booth there. We're working on getting some suckers printed with the city logo on them and that we'll hand out, not fish, but like lollipops. And we'd love to have council members, if you're available, to stop by our booth and help hand those out to the public and be available to speak with the public and things like that at our booth during Sucker Day. Not on the parade day, but I guess it'd be Saturday.
I've got one more for you. We've got movies in the park this Saturday evening, weather permitting. We're showing Incredibles 2. So come on out. Start at dusk.
Very good.
I do have one last thing. I'd like to say we are honored that Mr. Sanders would choose us to spend his birthday with. So happy birthday, Ron. Hope you've had a good one.
We had people with anniversaries tonight here.
I know. We're getting kind of cool.
There you go. Hey, the place to be, right? The place.
It's yours too? Oh, your husband's. We'll tell him happy birthday.
Well, your birthday was last week, so we'll celebrate. Yeah. Okay. Anything else from council except for birthdays? No? All right, we will. Mr. Peterson.
I move that city council go into closed executive session pursuant to section 610-021, 2 and 12 RSMO so that council may discuss the leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate and documents related to a negotiated contract. I also move that this closed executive session, records related thereto, and any votes taken by the council during the session will be closed pursuant to section 610-021 RSMO, and that the city council shall stand adjourned at the conclusion of the closed executive session.
Very nice.
And 1 second.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Amy Hookstrat,
Yes.
Sean Lucas,
Yes.
Justin Orff,
Yes.
Jared Giddens,
Yes.
Aaron Peterson,
Yes.
Darlene Graham.
Yes.
Thank you.